I just want to introduce the third panel. So the third panel, this really is very focused on kind of advocacy on the ground, and we've asked each of the speakers here today to speak to us about their experience of working with people either who are in prison or who've come out of prison. And I'm delighted to be joined by this panel, and obviously we have James sitting on this. He's off the hook now in terms of having to keep time and all of that, and now I have the hard job now that he's let it go way over. So no, I'm only joking. Obviously with the tech problems, we have James, who I was here earlier today. And I think most people were here for this morning's panel, but just in case you weren't, I'll introduce him again. James is an award-winning podcaster. He's an expert by experience, and he's appeared in the Tommy Tiernan show speaking about his first-hand experience with addiction and the criminal justice system. He's since spoken on the Late Late, Prime Time and other TV and radio shows, and he's worked in the areas of education, youth work, homelessness, addiction and community health. He's an award-winning podcaster, and he's a full-time PhD student in University College Cork. We're delighted to be joined as well by Warren Graham. Warren Graham is an advocate with lived experience of imprisonment, and you'll notice Warren is joining us virtually today, and we're delighted that he could be here and that the sound works, because it worked perfectly this morning when we tried. But of course we had a bit of difficulty there. So Warren works with Senator Loughan on a number of projects, including a research project focused on neurodiversity in prisons that IPRT is supporting as well. He's also presented to the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Justice about the rehabilitative services provided to people in prison. We're then joined by Miriam Healy, who's the chaplain in Wheatfield prison. She's trained as a hospital chaplain in New York after a career in the arts. She was assigned to the 17th floor in Bellevue Hospital, which is the medical wing for the men from Rikers Island. And it was there she first encountered people in prison. It was their lives that transformed her understanding of who is in prison. Then we have AnnMarie Sweeney. Well, actually, we have William Lawrence, if I look at the table there. So William's a mental health worker, a traveller man, and has served time in prison. Following his release, he embarked on a new path and is working for Exchange House Ireland National Traveller Service, where he provides peer support to traveller men in prison and their families. For the past year, he's also been leading a traveller support group at Mountjoy Prison. He's a certified Safe Talk trainer, hoping to empower others to recognise and respond to signs of suicidal behaviour. And then, last but not least, we have AnnMarie Sweeney. And AnnMarie is a traveller outreach worker at Coolmine Therapeutic Community, and she also works closely with the Traveller Justice Initiative. She previously worked as a primary healthcare worker with Pavy Point Traveller and Roma Centre. She's passionate about supporting and advocating for women in the criminal justice system and using her own lived experience of the system to help make positive change. So I think you'll all agree we have a really wide range of expertise on the panel, and I'm really excited about this panel and hearing directly from them. So we asked each person to prepare maybe just a 2-minute input at the beginning before we get into prepared questions that we have, but also we do have a couple of questions, or I think we got one question on the Padlet perhaps, so we'll throw that in there as well, but we do have panel questions that we'll put to them afterwards. But James, I might start with you to do your quick 2-minute input.
Mic is good. Yeah. My name is James Leonard, and I suppose over the last few years I've done a lot of work in prison. I remember when I first started kind of getting into work after coming out of college, I didn't want to go into prison. I was very nervous about it, and you have, if anybody with a background like my own going back into prison for the first time, you're thinking like, how are you going to be received? Are people going to think, who do he think he is? You know, all that. How I ended up going to the prison then was we went in and we interviewed a couple of ladies in Limerick prison, and we interviewed myself and Timmy with the podcast, and we interviewed a few people in Mountjoy, the Midlands and places like that, and then we started getting the podcast on the prison TV channel, and then out of that then we did talks in all the prisons around Ireland during Mental Health Week in the prisons last year, and from that was eye-opening experience in terms of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, but really hearing the lads and ladies' feedback at the end of it, you know. and giving them an opportunity to voice the frustrations, concerns, what was working well and what wasn't working well. But one of the consistent themes that came back was waiting lists for psychological services, for addiction services, and real frustration. I see Governor Conroy here a while ago, but I remember when we were in the Midlands, it was a very big room, like there was about 80, 90 people in there, in the school, and at the end of the talk we opened it up, but just happened that the Governor came in with the Justice people and IPS people, and it kind of went a bit pear-shaped, but they, I suppose, when we're doing the talks like that, they have frustrations, but what we're trying to communicate as well is the same frustrations the Governor has and the teacher in the school has, and nobody wants a waiting list, and nobody wants anybody waiting for services, and we all want the same things, you know what I mean? And that was part of it as well. Over the last few years, I was part of a group. We brought addiction studies course from UCC into Cork Prison, and when we were developing that, I really wanted it to be, I didn't want literacy to be a barrier, and we brought in, it was a certificate of attendance, and but we wanted people to get credits out of it. That was at the end of the lads were like, what do we do now? Do you know what I mean? We've not to show for it, so now they graduate with university credits, which is amazing, and to bypass to keep it inclusive for people that can't read and write or have troubles, they can create a piece of art, they can do spoken word, personal reflection, and that fits the assessment criteria to get the credits. And it transforms people's experience of education, and they graduate with their families present at the university, and all of a sudden there are different horizons, you know what I mean? They start looking at life, looking at themselves differently. And if you think about, as a criminology student, I always think about Shad Maroon, he writing about assistance, and people have to move from a condemnation script to a redemption script. I'm no good, I can't be nothing, to maybe I can. And I think education is a vital part of that, because education opens up doors, opportunities for employment, to be independent, to be useful, to learn about yourselves and your community, and learn skills and be entrepreneurial and stuff like that. So yeah.
Wouldn't be boring, yes, but we're having a difficulty with John's video. And going through us, which he can't see us, and they can see him. Warren, keep yours forward.
Yeah.
Yep. So do you want to do your 2-minute input then, and we can
Yeah.
get the video back on our end?
Thank you. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to attend. I wished I could have done it in person, but again, we're grateful for the technology that allows this. I'd like to firstly agree with James with regards to education. I've done a lot of education through the course of my prison sentence. I started at VTAC level 2 and 3 in music and cookery, and kind of got nudged further into level 4 and 5. I finished my education with a degree in criminology, and I hope to maybe pursue more upon release. I've done a lot of advocacy in regards to my own and for other prisoners. I spoke at events such as the European Prison Education Association conference in Ainger Street maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I've spoken to the Justice Committee, as you mentioned. In Newt University, I'm working with Senator Loughan now for maybe 2.5 years, mainly researching prison reform and education reform with regards to prisoners. I think it's very important for prisoners to get the best and the most out of their time in prison, particularly with regards to the right of education and indeed the right of voting, which was mentioned earlier. I understand the difficulty in accessing information regarding who you would vote for, but we have a podcast here in Loughan House that we're looking to expand into the prisons and across the prison TV station that will hold, or maybe be a channel for such information to reach every prisoner in Ireland. It's something that we will endeavour over the next few months, and something that I believe has the potential to do really good things across the prison estate. Anyone who's interested in partaking or participating in our podcast could indeed inform the Irish Prison Service in regards to what they would like to do. I suppose something I've done for myself in the early days of my sentence was working hard on my vocabulary. I figured that if I could better understand the services in the prison, the language they use, and the expectations that they had of me, I could better, I suppose, navigate my way through prison. Believing then that articulation was the best tool for advocacy. I worked with the Red Cross, with the Samaritans, done the peer mentoring, and indeed the podcast now that we're doing. I will continue to do more work, I suppose, for myself and for other prisoners. I think that'll do for now.
Thanks a million, Warren, and sorry you can't see us. We would have been delighted to have you here today, but it's great that you could join us virtually. Miriam, I might go to you next for your 2-minute input.
Thanks very much, everybody. I have one of my colleagues is here as well, and one of the retired chaplain at Wheatfield is here as well. It's she who gets me up to things like this. A few words of paraphrasing Oscar Wilde in The Ballad of Reading Gaol. I know not whether laws be right or whether laws be wrong. All that we know who lie in jail is that the wall is strong, and that each day is like a year whose days are long. This too I know, and wise it were if each could know the same, that every prison that we build is built with bricks of shame, and bound with bars lest Christ should see how men their brothers maim. For they starve the little frightened child till it weeps both night and day, and some grow mad and all grow bad, and none a word may say. In terms of advocacy, the chaplain of Rikers Island said this: the administration has no power to control the dialogue between the chaplain and the prisoner. And it is in that space that we, and we're very privileged to be, have our unique place and reason for being there. We are with people in a system which, if they get to express it, as the men on my right and my left so eloquently do, is primarily an encounter of enormous poverties and a minefield of questions. How do I tell you about the people I meet in prison? How do I tell you? If only you knew them, you would see what we see. You would see people who need a chance to heal. You would see people who skipped school, got addicted at a young age, couldn't break the habit, became slaves to the drugs trade, robbed, even killed, did things they were ashamed of, but that they freely admit. Came into prison and just don't know where to break the cycle they are spiraling in. You would see families who carried too big a load. You would see children searched by sniffer dogs and mothers trying to explain why daddy can't come home. One woman said to me, I just don't know if I can keep bringing him up. This is about her little son. He is so upset for days after the visit. He doesn't understand why his daddy is away from him. You would see babies being brought in for the first time. You would see people. You would see mothers who could tell the politicians exactly where they're going wrong and compel them to listen by the moral truth of their voices. And what about victims of crime? Again, people. We fail them both in our current system. People in prison know their rights, but they find it hard to exercise them. They find it hard to be heard. We as chaplains, we talk about advocacy and we itemize the things as we've done today that need to change. And we excel at describing the problems because we have so much experience with the problems. But what is the root of these problems? In our analysis as chaplains, we have the wrong view of the man and woman in prison. We are wedded as a society to a retributive justice system. We are wedded to a model of punishment that further destroys people's spirit, further destroys family life, further destroys young children's lives, deprives them of their father, because I work in Wheatfield. And while it may temporarily relieve a victim of crime's fears, it does little to guarantee their safety or the healing of their lives. Now, the state gets its power from the people of Ireland. We cannot honestly speak about rehabilitation in our prisons because our society, we the people, in complete abdication of our responsibility, has told our elected officials, punish the person so they don't do it again, increase the sentences so they don't do it again, lock them up so they don't do it again. But you don't see the effect of that policy. We do. We do. We have to remember and to accept as a society that it's citizens who have already been failed once that are behind bars. Sometimes you hear as a chaplain about someone's life and you just wonder how they have survived that childhood. You listen to what they have suffered, you see what they have done. They admit the damage they have done. 9 times out of 10, they would do anything to repair that damage. But we don't admit as a society that we need to do anything to repair the damage we have done as a society by the way we think about prison, about neighbourhoods, and about economic opportunities. So just to end, why do we have such trust as chaplains in the people we serve in prison? Because they compel us to. By their reality and the dignity of their lives. They are honest, they are truthful, they've nothing left to lose, and so are their families.
Thanks so much, Miriam. I don't know if that other microphone's working or not. If there's feedback, then we can turn one of them off. But William, I might hand over to you then to give your 2 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know how to follow that now. So I'm a mental health worker with Exchange House Ireland, which is a national traveller service. Just I suppose go back a few steps. I spent a number of years in prison. In prison, I learned how to read and write. I went to prison without being able to kind of spell my own name, so I went to the school and learned how to read and write. In prison, I suppose thinking about how I got involved in working with Advocacy and supporting people since I've come out of prison was through Red Cross, being a Red Cross volunteer, being a listener, working in partnership with Pavy Point and the Irish Prison Service to deliver a 12-week programme in feud deterrence programme, which I really enjoyed doing. It gave me a kind of thing where I really wanted to do that kind of work when I got out. When I did get out then, I went to work with Anne Costello, with the Traveller Prison Initiative. Well, formerly the Traveller Initiative, now Traveller Justice Initiative. And I suppose doing that work and working with people who had similar experiences and similar backgrounds really kind of made me want to do it more. So I was doing a CE scheme with Exchange House, and the opportunity came to be part of the mental health team. So I went for the interview and I got the job, and I've been doing that for the last 2 years. Part of that work, I run a traveller support group with my colleague Miriam, who's a social worker, and we do that once a week. We run a group in Mountjoy. We also do I do a lot of one-to-one stuff with lads in Wheatfield. Usually, kind of from word of mouth, I'm getting a lot more referrals lately. You kind of help one lad get transferred to an open prison, and now you're getting 20 phone calls. Can you get my son for an open prison, or my husband? So I'm doing a lot of that work. I'm very busy with that. I suppose it's not my main role. Like I'm a mental health worker, do a lot of work around accommodation, and the prison work, kind of working with prisoners. Their families, and I'm working with families as well, and a lot of stuff comes in about accommodation, because if lads are in prison, the dole could be in their name, the rent could be in their name, all that type of stuff. So it's trying to work with them and help support families. Sometimes rent is not paid while they're in prison as well, so it's trying to negotiate with councils to try and sort things out like that. I think that's me, yeah.
Well done. Thanks, William. I'll hand over to AnnMarie then.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Yeah. Thanks, William. Yeah, I'm AnnMarie, and I'm a support worker in Coomine. I'm here because of my personal experience. I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of work with Anne Costello across the country with around discrimination and training judges and maybe prison officers and in discrimination in the criminal system. But my own personal experience is, look, I came from prison, and I came from addiction, and I came from mental health. And for me, it started off as being poor and survival mode, to mental health, to addiction, to prison. What I'm here for today is just specifically to talk about women in prison. I think just because you go to prison, I don't think you should lose that mother. I'm not a mother anymore. I'm not a mommy anymore, you know. And lose that communication. I know for myself, I had 5 kids, and when I got taken out, no one expected I was going to be taken out so soon. And when I did, the kids was kind of spread across the country, the family members that could take care of them at the time. And 5-minute phone calls wasn't going to cut it to each child. And I think for a mother sitting in a jail cell, one thing is knowing that you went there because you've done these crimes. But another thing is that you're dealing with mental health and addiction. But to be able not to have that contact or to know what's going on with your children, 5 minutes don't cut it between 5 kids, and you have to pick which child. I've recently heard of a mother coming on to do a video, and her kids was taken with Tusla, and the kids was there, Tusla was there, it was set up with the prison, and the mother didn't show up. But that kid wouldn't come back the following week. That kid thought the mother didn't want to talk to him. That kid never came back. So for me today, from my personal experience and all the work, and I'm very passionate about the girls in the prison, and women, and not just travelling women, all women that are mothers, and all women in general. But to be able to come here today, and thank you very much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. I never knew when I was in prison that there was people out here doing this kind of work. To me, no one gave the care. No one asked me about rights. I certainly didn't know nothing about rights or anything like that when I was in prison. Now I know, thankfully, Sale and Bernardo's are now going into prison. That's great to hear that there are people coming in, and they're coming in, the services coming in to help these women with a lot of different issues. And that's great to hear from me. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
So I suppose last week we would have met just before the conference to try and have a bit of a chat about what this panel was going to look like. And I know so many people on the panel have shared that they have lived experience, but that was not the reason that they were asked to be on this panel. It was actually because of all the work that they have done since. So just to say that up front, but you have been so generous with your experience as well. And I think because you have experienced from both sides, so many of you really know what the key issues are. And one of the things that came up in the discussion last week was around communication. And communication when you're in prison, communication between you and your family, but also between the decision makers and you as a person in prison. And maybe, or if you're working with people in prison, you know, the difficulties, the way things are conveyed or communicated to the person or not, as the case may be, all come into play. So I just wondered if anybody from the panel had wanted to kind of elaborate a bit more on that. I wish we'd recorded the conversation last week, actually, because it was great. But if you want to emulate that here, and I know James couldn't join us or Warren couldn't join us for that call. And Warren, if you can switch your camera on, you might want to do that for this panel or for the rest of the panel then. So William, you indicated you want to come in there.
From my own experience as well, from the work I do with the lads now, I think the biggest kind of gripe or issue the lads have is when they ask for something. Do you know what I mean? If it's a no, they never be told why it's a no. Sometimes they're not even told no. Like, do you know, they don't get communicated. By putting to get out from the children's home community, and the days came and gone, and I've never been told no. Do you know what I mean? I've never been told why that decision was made. So that was always very hard. Never understanding why a decision was made. Again, if you're not explaining why it's no, I think sometimes, like, no one wants to give bad news. But I think it's a real problem in prison. You're not important enough to explain why this is not happening. And the group I work with, the lads, it always comes up when they're applying for things, jobs. And with the traveller lads, when they, like, for good reason, when they get refused something, they kind of can't help thinking it's because they're a traveller, because of lived experience of discrimination. So it might be never that reason. It could be for other reasons, security reasons, but because they're not explained the reason, it's automatically bad, and it affects their mental health. It really does.
No, thanks, William. Anyone else want to come in on that? AnnMarie?
Yeah, I was just, as I was saying about, you know, for the mothers and the kids, the communication is gone. There's no, as soon as you're behind bars, that's it. The communication is lost between you and the kids. And some of the mothers are just taken out. Some of the mothers obviously have kids in care. And I think it's not a big thing. I think it's easily done. But you kind of put that connection between both. So And stress alone never has on the mother, on her mental health, and the stress it has also on kids. I don't think it's a big
Yeah, it's something we would hear a lot. We have a Children and Families Initiative, so we hear about that impact a lot. I remember being in the Docus recently and one of the teachers talking about the storybook Mum and Dads and just the difference that that made with some of the kids who were coming in with the social worker the next time they saw their mum, because it had been a video and they were like, oh, we saw mum on TV, but like it broke down some barriers for them, and it was just really powerful. She said it was one of the most powerful things she'd seen. So, you know, I think we could do more, particularly around that piece around not just mothers, fathers as well. Like there was a kids camp in Shelton Abbey last Halloween, and it was the first time some of those fathers had had one-on-one time with their children. And I think those are the kind of things that are often forgot. But did anyone else want to come in the communications piece? Warren, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, thank you, Saoirse. I think it is really important to have coherent communication and information sharing. I think Dorina mentioned earlier about the staff role in advocacy, and the staff are usually the men we go to first and foremost. But even when it comes to communication on their part, they're not always given the full scale of a story or an answer to respond to us in kind why we might have been refused something we were looking for. So there's a big issue with regards to communication and how it trickles down from the top. Again, with regards to information sharing, I will advocate for the podcast in Loughan House. I think it is a unique tool with which we can put information into every cell in the prison estate. And I think, you know, anyone can come in and drop 15 minutes recording, and it can be broadcast across the whole of our prisons. I think it's really important to focus on that going forward and maybe get some more volunteers with regards to what information we can provide.
Great, thanks, Warren. And James, you wanted to come in?
It's kind of touching on what William was talking about there, but an issue we came across when we were teaching in Cork Prison, the addiction studies course, was a couple of people that they'd be doing the course and they'd be doing really well, and it might be their first dipping the toe into education after having terrible experiences in school. And next one of the weeks then, one of the lads wasn't there. He was after getting transferred up the country out of the blue, you know. And I understand that there's, you know, management are trying to, there's security issues, there's beds and overcrowding and stuff like that, but they're still people in the end of the day, and their lives are transformed at the flick of a pen. You know what I mean? And the upheaval it caused in that part for his life, you can only hope that he didn't get caught up in drugs with the fear and everything of going into a new prison as a cockfly, maybe in Dublin or whatever, you know. But I don't know, is there any way we can balance the people, the individual rights of a prisoner and the security and the coordination of a prison campus, so that people that are keeping their head down, they're involved in the services and the education, whatever, that they're not the ones to be drafted up out of the blue. And as what William was saying as well, a lot of the time they don't get told why they're going. You're going and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think I can respond to that. I just had to sort of digest what William said there, but what he's saying underneath that, I feel, is it's about, you know, what value is placed on the human being who's in prison. And again, if you're a traveller, you're having the feeling you're being discriminated against. But my own feeling is it's just the whole system isn't set up. It's not set up in a way to give people a sense of their dignity, or just that they deserve a right to an answer to a question. Now, I know as a chaplain we're running around, the ratio is like 1 to 640 right now some days. So I know I fail in getting back to people who are asking things of me. But the point, you're making a deeper point, is that we've got things set up in a way where the human being isn't taken account of. And that's very important.
Great, thank you. And I suppose one of the other things we were one of the questions that actually came from the audience on the Padlet was around just, you know, you talked about transfer to a different prison there, but just the lack of consistent approach maybe across the prison estate, that, you know, something might be very different in one prison as it is in another. And just, are the pros and cons to that in your work? You know, is it a good thing that they all operate slightly differently, or would you welcome it being more consistent right across the board?
Sometimes it can work differently within the same prison, depending on the day, and depending on what officer is on. Or that's the problem as well. Like, some officers are better for opening the gym than others. Some officers are better for bringing people over to the school than others. It shouldn't be like that within the one campus. And there's definitely discrepancy in services around the prison campuses. You know what I mean? But I don't know if somebody else wants to come in on that.
Yeah, I would say we're very much individual, like we're dependent on individuals. So, like, if we have an officer who's really good and he's really supportive of everything you're doing, well, he's usually moved. And he's moved to maybe a different position. He's good, it's recognised he's good, so he's getting a promotion, he's going somewhere else. So, and we're stuck with some fella who doesn't want to do it. And then you see, I mean, they're not getting the lads when you're meant to be getting them, and it's negative comments. And so you are very dependent out of the individual. And even just thinking on the visits, like, to have officers who are allocated to the visits, but if they're not there that day and someone's took off another place and he might have to hump because he's meant to have a handy number in the general office, now he's on visits going back and forth to getting people, he just might not do it with a full heart. I mean, he's doing it negative because he didn't want to be there in the first place. So you are very dependent on the goodwill of the officers.
Great. Anyone else want to come in? No? Yep.
No, potentially the fact that things are different in prisons is actually a good thing, because it means they remain human rather than systems. They remain relational spaces that we can affect and change if we're smart enough and, you know, well able to to put forward things. So, for example, in a prison at the moment that I'm in, there's a governor who's got exceptional experience. The door is always open, very prisoner orientated. I know there's an awful lot of work we're going to be able to do with that man. Precisely because he's slightly, you know, he's different. He's a huge experience in the prison service, and he will leverage it on behalf of people. So in a sense, the fact that it's human, we all have a chance to affect some change if we can use our people power.
Great, thanks. I might go to some individual questions then, and maybe if we have a couple of minutes at the end, we might take one or two from the audience as well. But I suppose then, James, a lot of your work has been around breaking stigma, and stigma is something that comes up time and time again in discussions around prison or people who've interacted with the criminal justice system. And I know Paula talked earlier about people with addiction and the stigma there. Do you want to say a little bit about that, perhaps?
Yeah, I think part of why I kind of went public, and I didn't have no intention to go public, it happened by accident, but I didn't shy away from it then either. It's about you humanising people, you know. If we think about the language in the media at the moment around illegals, you know, there are people coming from war, they're not illegals. Somebody mentioned earlier on junkies, prisoners even.
Yeah.
They're people. And that was the motivation for myself. And to engage, like, we're all criminal justice geeks here. But what I wanted to do was engage regular people. Yeah. Give people a platform, not to exploit them or trauma, like, you know, capitalising on people's trauma or anything like that. Is to get the wider public to understand that it's not other people that's in prison, it's people in your family, in your estate, and they're everybody's problem, we're all the one. And it's very hard. I seen a video on YouTube recently about this German guy. He was in the far right, he was a neo-Nazi, and he's not now, but he was talking about one of the transformation when he was in prison. He became friendly with a Jamaican guy. It's very hard to hold a grudge or a prejudice against somebody when you get to know their story and you get to know the backstory and the context. Then you can look past the offence, the crime and the labels. You know, this is somebody that come from a traumatic background of poverty, discrimination, that had so many obstacles in the way. Yeah, they made a mistake, but they're still a person. And, you know, I think if you can humanise people, it goes a long way to beat the stigma as well. The more people like myself and others in the room that waive their anonymity and that come out, then we don't have to be ashamed. We don't have to be going around like a grateful slave. Thanks for the opportunity. You know, we deserve what we work for it like everybody else. We don't want no handouts. We'll work as everybody else, but you know, there's nothing to be ashamed of. There's more people in society that have criminal records, that have convictions. It doesn't define who you are or what you can become. It's just a period in your life that you can move past, and that's it really.
Is that on now? No, that's not working at all.
Musical mics.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. I'll just, sorry about this. We always have an issue with mics at every event. I don't know what it is. We might just need to buy our own or something. But I suppose then maybe, Warren, I might go to you next. You know, I'm just wondering, do you have any experiences of advocacy that you've carried out, you know, either for yourself or others while in prison? And, you know, what are the challenges that you faced? You know, how did you overcome those? And maybe share something around that, or even some of the work that you've been doing with Senator Loughan.
Yeah, thank you, Saoirse. I suppose the biggest and most important advocacy for myself is my parole interviews, advocating for my future and for my release. I mean, that's one of the most nerve-wracking, stomach-wrenching interviews I've ever to endure. But we do endure, and we learn through the process, and we get better, and we kind of are able, put in a position to be able to advocate for ourselves and stand up and speak for ourselves without, as James says, feeling unhuman or dehumanized to these powers that basically hold our future in their hands. You know, it's quite scary, but something we have to do, and we do it very well over time. And the challenges again were languages and kind of understanding the expectations they had of me. And again, education helped me with that. I think in terms of advocacy for others, the stuff on the Justice Committee was very important to talk about the rehabilitation opportunities in prison, but also the barriers to rehabilitation. And I think it was Susan mentioned earlier with regards to the reputation of some prisoners coming in and how the media distort that reputation and how parole or government officials might then perceive the individual, and that can have drastic implications for them going forward in regards to rehabilitating themselves and getting opportunities to rehabilitate themselves. That kind of reputation can stay with them forever, no matter what they do to try and change or try and help themselves. So speaking on the Justice Committee was really important to me. And the work with Senator Loughan is very important, particularly the research you mentioned earlier in relation to neurodiversity. We believe, and we're still, I suppose, just finished the scoping exercises, and I've yet to endeavour into the actual groundwork, but we're fairly strong in our belief that we're going to find a significant number of people in the prison system who will suffer with some form of learning difficulty, ADHD or autism spectral disorder, whichever it be. And I suppose the future then, or the proposals for the future, is to advocate for their rights and for their well-being going beyond prison. And I think that's going to be very challenging work, but also very important to get some information and statistics regarding neurodiversity in prisons. Now, it's a small sample we're starting with, but I think beyond that, we could maybe look to broaden the research and hopefully get more people involved. At the moment, we have a number of organisations involved, and it's looking quite good. And again, it's something I look forward to seeing in its conclusion.
Thanks, Warren. It's really interesting, just that piece of work, and just, you know, I think we all know about the issues that people face in prison, but part of the problem is the lack of data and the lack of concrete data when we're trying to advocate for them. So I think that comes up time and time again. So it's great to see that kind of work being done. I might go to AnnMarie next, because I'm conscious she hasn't come in for a little while. AnnMarie, you know, you touched on the piece around mothers earlier, but what are the specific issues that impact traveller women in prison? You know, and how do you work with those women to address those challenges?
I think travelling women not knowing anything when they go in there. I think obviously literacy and, you know, I will say discrimination, that would be the first trauma thing I've ever experienced in my life. And not understanding the system and thinking that the system has already failed me so many times before. Is it going to be the same now? And feeling like you didn't have the right to go up. I don't ever remember thinking I had the right to go up and say, what are my rights? I didn't even think I was allowed to have that. You know, I thought that once I went in there, that was it. All rights were taken off you. Any human right anyways that was taken off you, being a mother. And And I think working in the work I have done for the last couple of years, and now the work that I'm doing, they're after taking on as a peer, and being able to go out to my own community and break down the stigma and the shame around mental health and addiction for women, for me, is a great opportunity for me. And to have first-hand experience in it on both sides of this, and be able to come back and give that back in, and understand the fears what them girls suffer with in the and the battles they're going to have to deal with when they get out. For me, that was a privilege. So,
Thanks so much for that. And then, William, I'll come to you next. You know, like, what tailored supports do you think could be put in place for travellers? I know AnnMarie mentioned earlier, for example, now Bernardo's, they have an advocacy service in the Docus working with traveller women specifically, and one of the things they said to me when I was chatting to them was they have a lot of settled women coming up saying, that's not fair, that it's not, that I can't avail of that too. But like, what kind of other tailored specific programs should be put in place, or supports?
I suppose just thinking about the work we're doing as peer support, and that's been supported by Traveller Justice Initiative, and it's been rolled out in Wheatfield Prison, and it's been rolled out in Limerick and the Midlands Prison. I think more of that could be done. Sometimes I think it's a lot of wasted resources within the prison as well, because you can turn up at the prison and they're short-staffed, and with the short staff overcrowding, schools are closed, so then we can't go up to do art class because we're usually facilitated in the school. So, like, it's things what can be tailored to work, but we do need cooperation of the prison service as well, and we need, obviously, to try and think of alternatives to getting more people out of prison or not going to prison in the first place, because that overcrowding is having a knock-on effect on the service where are being delivered. I said, like, the support we do in terms of the traveller support group, we work around communication skills, mental health, addiction, but we only do one group on the A wing, which is protection. You have B wing, C and D who are getting on, and there's loads of travellers over there. It's another load of travellers over in the protection or the progression unit. Well, they're not now actually, because they've been transferred back because that's been closed down, but or repurposed. But my point is, like, it's more that could be done. A lot more work of that could be done. And I suppose just to add AnnMarie's point, not I can really talk for women, but on thinking about traveller women, when traveller men go to prison, when they get out, they might be treated different. They might be brought for a pint, might be a party. When traveller women get out, and this is something only really highlighted to me after having conversations with Anne, because I wouldn't really have heard of much traveller women going to prison, but I see a lot more now. Like, they're totally kind of disowned in a lot of cases. Do you know what I mean? It's a lot more judgment, it's a lot more stigma around addiction and being in prison. It's just not expected of women. So I think it's a lot harder for women. So a lot more, I'd be always advocating for a lot more support for traveller women within prison.
Thanks, William. That's really important. And then Miriam, I might come to you. You know, when people phone IPRT, we're not a service provider. So when they ask for help, one of our first questions usually is, have you spoken to the chaplain? Because you do end up having to do huge amounts of work within the prison system. So maybe, do you want to tell us a little bit about, you know, the common issues that you come across in your work, how you build trust and confidentiality with the people that the men that you're working with, and just tell us a little bit about how you support them.
First of all, I never know how come that is, but there's immense trust between the chaplain and the person in prison. It's just, maybe it's the culture, I don't know what it is, but the kinds of things, like the common issues that they would bring to our attention would be need for meaningful work in the prison, need for treatment, drug treatment, need for housing on release, need the chance to go to school, for something to read or paint or do or make, need help with grief, need to see a sick parent, child or partner, need to contact a child in care, need to be at a parent's funeral or a wake, need to be heard, understood, and a chance to change direction and to find a place in the world and to belong. It's like everybody else. It's just like everybody else. And they can be spiritual issues, emotional issues, practical, physical issues. It's you respond to the person in front of you. And I cannot tell you the privilege and the immense trust that flows between us, and we get to move within that system, all around it, in and out of the governors, the chief, whoever it is, knocking down doors, banging, trying to bring relief to the situation that we see. So it's the alleviation of suffering within a system that needs to change.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, are there any questions from the floor? We might have time for one or two. I see two hands there, so we'll take those two. Sorry, we are running out of time, and I do want to give the lads a chance to reflect. So there was a hand here, and here were the first two I saw, sorry. But we will come back if people want to chat afterwards.
Thanks very much. Powerful stuff. Thanks to the panel. John is my name. I work in Wheatfield teaching mindfulness, and now with a Centre for Mindfulness, running a mindfulness in prisons in Ireland. But I love at the very end you say the next steps, Saoirse, for your thing. And what really strikes me is, and you mentioned it, Miriam, it's the societal problem that we have. You know, people say let them die. Even our own minister saying scumbags when we're talking about people who instead of asking the question what happened to them, it's a whole new way of working. I work in the inner city for 30 years. We're trying as a network to work in a multi-agency way with dialogue, a new way of working. So it's not all on one person, it's interagency work. I've learned so much today, but there's 10 different organisations between the justice system, judges and solicitors, to Gardaí, to prison staff, chaplains, volunteers, stakeholders, Red Cross, HSC, media, TUSLA, probation, IPRT. Is there a chance that and maybe you did this already because I don't know about you, this is my first experience with your organisation, is a dialogue going forward with those key stakeholders to say, well, because we're all asking for change. We all know it's not serving either the victims of crime, the people, how many people are in prisons. I hear from chaplains all the time and prison officers, there's too many people in here with mental health issues and addiction issues that shouldn't be here. We need stats on them to provide alternatives. And I know that from the inner city, trying to get beds for parents with addiction is horrendous. So the next step, it does need a very new way of sharing the load for everybody. There's amazing people here in the prison systems, in the courts, wanting change. But how do we actually do that? Because it'll be a much nicer society if we do it. I mean, I understand why people say, oh, they're scumbags. I can understand that those thoughts come into my head too. Mindfulness helps me to stop and think and re-look at it. And we all need that. We all need to support each other with that. So I wonder, have you a role in that, please? Thanks.
I think IPRT probably does, and I might speak about that rather than take the time. I might speak about that a little bit in the next steps. But you're right, language is so important. Like last week was probably, you know, when we saw the overdoses in Portlaoise, we've been talking about overcrowding for so long, and all of a sudden we were inundated with media requests. Like, you know, the numbers hit 5,000 back at the end of June. Like the most we could get on that was a letter to the Irish Times that we wrote to them. Yet last week in 24 hours I did something like 8 different interviews, and people were finally kind of listening to it, and they wanted to talk about how drugs get into prison, like what happened there. And I didn't want to talk about that, and at one point I did say, I don't want to talk about drugs in prison, I want to talk about addiction, I want to talk about mental health, I want to talk about all those issues. And you know, let's ask that question, why people feel the need to take drugs in prison in the first place. You know, that's the question, not how did they get in there. So I could talk about that for a very long time. I won't, because I do want to pass back over to the panel. But I might touch on that next steps rather than, you know, come back. Does anyone want, I might take the second question and then let the panel come back in just in the interest of time. This lady here in the black and yellow.
Hiya, I just want to, I work with teenagers that are involved in the criminal system in a bail supervision scheme, and we're working on a programme that is looking at multi-systemic therapy and going into the family homes and trying to do the ecology piece. I'm just wondering from the panel that's sitting there, is there something that would have helped within early years that might have prevented further development into criminality? Or like, I would have worked in Obersound for a while as well and seen that structure that happens within there, but that it, unfortunately, it seems to be a system whereby you're on the wheel and it's nearly, you're 23, 24, 25 years of age before you're able to step off that wheel.
Does anyone on the panel want to come in on either of those points?
Yeah, I come in there first.
I was mentioned earlier on when I was a young fella, my dad went to prison. I was very close to him at the time. I still am very close to him, thankfully. But I remember being heartbroken by it.
Yeah.
And one day he's there, next he's gone. No, he's been to court a few times and he always came home. Do you know what I mean? But the trial, when you're a child, you don't understand trials. You just know your dad is there and he's coming back, and then he's not coming back. And I think the intervention needed to be done there. Like, there was no support there from my mother or for us, and even though the money that was coming into the house was through illegitimate means, when you're the child, you just know that daddy's not here no more, now you're very poor, and your mum is very stressed, and all her time now is going into looking after your younger sisters, and you're lost. And that was where the intervention was needed. Looking after children, like, I never even knew people even considered children in terms of when people go to prison until I was studying criminology in my master's degree only a few years ago, and I came across literature, a field of literature of children of imprisoned parents. And when my dad was in prison, I went into secondary school. I had terrible experience. I had very bad behaviour and stuff like that. I was bold, disruptive. These were the labels all over my report cards. But when I was reading the literature as a criminology student, all the behaviours that I was exhibiting were very normal, given the context I was coming from. But the teachers didn't care to ask, or there was no support put in place. Just, you're not performing as a student, you're no good to us, you know. You go through your life thinking then that you're no good, that education is not for me. That was my mantra, even though education is for me. But I went through a lot of years thinking that education is not for me. And your whole life opportunities are so narrow when you talk to yourself like that. Self-limiting core beliefs, how you view yourself, all that is shaped in childhood and adolescence. So I think by the time the interventions came for me in Garda Youth Diversion projects or in prisons and stuff like that, I was on the path then. Do you know what I mean? I thought I knew it all, do you know? And it wasn't until I got a little bit maturer, then I was able to knock on Sheila's door when I was ready and say, look, I'm ready now, like, what do I need to do? You know, but some people don't live to that age.
No.
And they get lost along the way. And some people don't grow out of it.
Yeah.
You know, some people don't grow out of it. They don't have the belief. That's a big thing. They don't have the belief that they can actually be something or have a different life. And that's why it's important for us to speak about this and to stand up and say, no, I used to think like that too, but you're only selling yourself short, you know what I mean?
Anyone else want to come in there?
I suppose I just think of my personal kind of story. Not having no education, going to school and not being learned how to read and write, and being kind of just forgotten at the back of the class type of thing. Do you know what I mean? I had to take it to like, great to get the education in prison and be able to go in and do third level education, but why did I have to wait to go to prison to be able to get this education? I suppose I'm just thinking in terms of the guards as well. I remember growing up and all my experiences with guards were all negative, and just from even being just pulled in for driving offences. So when you ever did need a help off a guard, most people, if they're a victim of crime, they'll turn to the guard. I wouldn't have, and then you feel like you have to handle it yourself, and then that's a whole another story. Then it's a lot of trouble in that. So I think, yeah, they were the two things that I think could be done a lot better.
Great. Anyone else on that? If not, then what I might... Oh, sorry, AnnMarie, you want to go?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that question, and I come across that question a lot with younger people. I think early interventions, like they're saying, education back in the day, and I don't think the supports are there for the mothers or the kids. Like, I don't remember someone coming in. I was afraid to let someone in even to take care of anything in the early days. Or I think my kids, for me, I had to take on the responsibility for my family when I was a kid and when I was younger, and I had to provide when there was no one there else to provide. But I don't remember anybody coming in, and if it was, we were more afraid of them because likelihood you were getting taken and you were getting put away. So that kind of fear was set there. But we're all here for change.
I know we've run over a bit, but I'm going to give everybody a chance to reflect. But just on the education piece, there's an academic in the UK called Dr. Karen Graham, and if you haven't come across her, really interesting work that she's done. She was at UCD a couple of months ago, so I got to meet her and presenting on her research. But she comes from a community where imprisonment was quite rife, and a number of family members have been imprisoned as well. But she started charting when the path started for a lot of people, and it was in school. So actually, when she went and interviewed a lot of those men about their experience in school, they were using the terminology for prison. Like they were like, oh yeah, well I was put in the cell, the little playroom at lunchtime, or like a kid was punished for not being able to sit still in class, again going back to that neurodiversity piece I think that Warren mentioned earlier. But she tracks that really well and tells her story. She did her PhD on it, so she's definitely worth a look if you haven't come across her already. But look, I know we've kind of gone over, I'm very conscious some people have trains to get perhaps, but what I would love to do is just with the panel maybe just to get your final reflections from the day, maybe what you're taking away, and if there is something that you think IPRT or others could do to better inform people in prison of their rights, or how we make that more accessible and ensure that people have the knowledge and the power to vindicate those rights. I'd love to hear if you've any bright ideas for us on what we do next, and that'll add into my next steps piece where I'll come back to John.
I think there was a lot of great discussions throughout today, but one of the things that was standing out for me was the voting situation and giving people the knowledge that they actually can vote, showing them who are their options. Like it's not going to, one person can't do that. It's going to need somebody to coordinate it, get a working group together, get the various politicians that might be, progressive, to kind of to champion it and to just get that going with the help of citizens information, the various community projects, and really just show people that it's their vote and they can make a change and they don't have to go to violence. They can use their vote to, could people feel like hopeless and helpless, and then they lash out. Whereas if we can educate them, even I didn't know what left wing and right wing was until I went to college, but like I thought my knowledge around left wing and right wing was from American media, and like a communist or a lefty was like the worst thing in the world, and then you realise you're a commie, So I think people don't understand. They don't understand. So I'd love to be a part of something like that. It's some like campaign around getting people registered to vote, helping them to vote, educating them around who they can vote for. I'd love to do something like that.
Great, thank you. Warren, do you want to go next, and then I'll go to Miriam?
Yeah, I suppose in terms of the expert by experience, I think it's really important to have people with experience participate in events like this. I mean, this panel in itself has a wealth of experience with regards to the prison system, the justice system, and I suppose what it's like to live post-prison. I've yet to experience that, though I do look forward to it. And I suppose there's opportunities to get our voices out there and to see representation of the prison population in and amongst these kind of events, and I suppose across the broader spectrum of work. And William's kind of doing a lot of work with the travellers, but there's many communities out there who would feel unrepresented, even by me talking today in regards to prisoners. I don't think every prisoner would sit and reflect and say that I'm representing them. So we definitely need more voices from our backgrounds, I think, going forward. I think it's really important to keep that in mind as we move. And I think that'll do for me, Saoirse.
Thanks so much, Warren. Miriam?
There we go.
I agree. I think people with lived experience, they carry a truth that compels us all to listen. And I think when you hear somebody speak who's had the experience, people in prison sit up because they go, if he can do it, I can do it. And that's really powerful. So I would be definitely on for promoting that. But secondly, if IPRT, in terms of what they could do, I think if you could help, without being dismissed as liberal, if you could help change the social narrative around who's in prison, that it's citizens that are in prison, that it's people that are in prison, that it's families. As Imelda's group says, it's not my crime, but it's still my sentence. That's what the family has. And finally, just the psychiatrist, is it Brendan Kelly, he says, Ireland loves an institutional solution to a social problem. I think we are way past that. We're better than that.
Thanks so much, Miriam. William?
Yeah, I think when we talked about lived experiences, I think going back to my own reason for getting involved in education and stuff like that within the prison was seeing the likes of Stephen Doyle from the Care After Prisons, Niall Walsh and Chris Woods from Pathways, people like that coming in and saying, well, they have criminal records and they're getting jobs and they can do it, well, why can't I do it? And then thinking of it from being a traveller perspective, I don't want to embarrass John Paul here, Cons, but seeing the likes of John Paul coming in, no John Paul growing up, seeing the likes of him being able to go to college and doing a degree, someone like myself, same beliefs, same background, well, maybe I could do something like that. And I just think about, and I can't say enough, I can't remember her name, but the woman from the IPS, and she was talking about they have great staff, and they do have great staff, and they have some who's not so good either, just to acknowledge that, but they do have a lot of good staff, but they're wasted because they're basically locking people up and they're not giving people, advocating people, because they're too busy locking the doors because they haven't got enough staff to do this and they haven't got enough staff to do that. They've got a load of teachers sitting out usually in canteen rooms because they've no staff to open the school. That's true. And that is such a wasted point, do you know what I mean? So, yeah, if we could look into that.
Yeah, lived experience for myself, and I'm going to say like the likes of John Paul, because back in my early days, John Paul, you were the first one I ever started to work with in the drugs and alcohol in Perry Point, and just seeing that people that has lived it and now educated themselves gave me hope, and that's where I am today. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much. And I know we had given you so many things to look at and prepare, and we just couldn't get to all of it. But I think it has been a really rich discussion. We've really covered a lot in it. And again, if people want to come back after, and I'm sure we can link people in with others here that have spoken today, but we will make these recordings available as well once we can. So that's the next steps, really. I suppose this was an IREC funded project. We have done Know Your Rights work over the years. We do want to update the information that we have. It changes sporadically. And, in other organisations that I've worked in, we've had Know Your Rights booklets. So, for example, in the Children's Rights Alliance, I did a Know Your Rights booklet. And it was really interesting because I remember when we did the first version of it, the mental health section was the strongest because the children and young people had torn it apart and put it back together again. And even some of the statutory bodies were like, why is that bit so good and not the rest? So the next time we did it, we learned and we went and spoke to the young people and we put it together, and they were like, we're not going to read a booklet, have it online. But that isn't really an answer for people in prison all of the time. So we do need to be creative, and we do need to think about how we can do that better. So one of the things that we would hope to do with the videos today is closed caption them, make them available to the IPS if they will put them through the prison TV. And perhaps because they're closed captioned, we could look at whether or not subtitles in other languages could be added. But we do need to try and get this information out there, and we do need to work with others. It's brilliant to hear the Citizens Information Service is going to roll out more information officers elsewhere. I think voting has come up a bit, and we're about to have a general election, and we are very conscious of that here in IPRT. So, a lot of the things that have come up today, we're looking at either in terms of our pre-budget asks, looking at more investment in alternatives to prison, looking at more investment in community support so people don't reach crisis point to end up committing an offence and ending up in prison, looking at supports for children and families to try and break any cycle that there may be, but also to support those people who then, James, you put it there, and it's the second story I've heard this week from somebody with lived experience of a parent in prison, just talking about the impact on the relationship, but also the impact on the financial piece. So one of the things IPRT is doing is we've actually just launched a tender for research on the financial impact of imprisonment on families with children in particular. So if anyone knows any researchers who'd be interested in that, please do get in touch. But our big focus is the general election here, and IPRT for my time was very effective in getting a lot into the programme for government. Some of it has happened, so we'll be repeating some of that again. But I think what we really do need to see is better investment in people, and better investment in community supports and in probation. But probation is only as good as the wraparound supports that are put in place with it. So that's one of the things we're going to be doing. One of the other things is IPRT is a membership organisation. So we are having our AGM in September, and one of the things that we've done as a team recently is look at the membership structure, because we are having more people come to us, like maybe say law firms who are obviously for-profit organisations. So we're looking at the structure a little bit, but it won't change dramatically for the people in this room, I would say. But we will be introducing an associate membership. But we would encourage people with lived experience to join as members, because we aren't a service provider. We do get calls. We do know some of the trends that are in prison. And with more organisations joining IPRT, we will be able to bring people together and try and be that voice for the sector as well, and work with others, and allow them to lead in other spaces where they have the knowledge, the expertise. And one of the other things we really do want to grow is that piece around lived experience and ensuring that people are given a platform and a voice. It's something that's very important to us and that we really are trying to do better at. So again, would welcome any suggestions there. But with this piece of work, then we will go away, we will reflect and see how we can better support people in prison to know what their rights are, how they can vindicate them, and look at what some of the challenges and barriers are. But I really want to thank everyone for being here today, and to so many of you for staying for the full day, because I know it is a long day. I know a lot has been thrown at you in terms of information. I'm sure people will reflect and come back to us and ask more questions, and we'd welcome that as well. But I do really want to thank all of our speakers, in particular the panel here that I've chaired, but James, Miriam, William, AnnMarie and Warren, and I want to thank the other speakers from the other panels. I know if I start going through all the names, I'm going to forget somebody, but it has been wonderful to have all, like, just the high caliber of speakers that we did have. And I want to pay a particular thanks to James, obviously, for emceeing and coming here and being so generous with your time and with your experience as well, because I know it's not easy to kind of relive some of these things, but you have been so generous in just sharing that with us. The other thing just to say as well on the voting piece, IPRT did write to all of the governors before the local and European elections, and Dr. Cormac Behan, who's our vice chair, who I think has just stepped out of the room, he's an expert in this, so we would have gotten an opinion piece in the paper around that as well. It is something when we are doing our general election work with, and we have started meeting the parties already, we are asking all of them to start kind of engaging with people in prison. But again, James, we might be taking you up on your offer to, look at what more we can do there to get that out there. I also want to thank, obviously the venue here. I want to thank Governor Lydon of Loughan House and the IPS for facilitating the video link today and the call. Obviously, we would have preferred to have Warren here in person, but where that wasn't possible, I am delighted that the tech actually worked in the end and that we were able to hear you, Warren, because those were such valuable contributions. I want to thank IREC for the funding, and then I want to pay a particular thanks to the IPRT team. So Pamela, Tara, Michelle and Aisling, all who've really worked above and beyond to make this happen today. And I want to pay a particular thanks to Dr. Helen Keogh, who is our former Legal and Public Affairs Manager. Couldn't be here today, but Helen would have pulled a lot of this together before she finished up with us last month. So hopefully we'll be sending her on the recordings anyway, so she can see just what a success today was. And then I want to finally thank the attendees, and particularly those who've asked questions, shared their experiences, and we would love you to keep in touch. So we will make this available. We'll send it out to attendees. It will be available on our website afterwards, along with a lot of the resources that we've mentioned today. But again, feel free to keep in touch, and Michelle's sitting looking at me, she's going to mention the website, mention socials, but and sign up to our newsletter. That is probably the best way to find out what we are up to and what we are doing and to engage with us. So thank you so much.